Welcome to the next section of this Excel 101 course. During this section, we're going to take a look at inserting additional elements such as images into your Excel documents. Now, I do want to put another disclaimer on this section. I love images. They add a lot of visual content to your Excel documents. But I do want to stress not to go overboard on this. It can be really easy to do. Placing an image or two, great. But you start adding a lot of clutter inside of there, it just turns into that. It's clutter. So take a look. We're going to see how to insert images. You got a couple different ways to do this. Just try not to take it too far as you're inserting images into your documents. So I want to insert an image. And you got multiple ways to do this. I can insert images that are on my computer. Maybe it's a picture from a camera that I have. I snapped a picture of something and now I want to throw this in there. Maybe it's a scanned image that I put into my computer. Maybe it's something I downloaded online onto my computer. Or we can go directly online and use Microsoft Bing, Microsoft search engine tool, to search for clip art images, free images that we can download and place into our Excel documents. So take a look. This is how you insert images into your Excel document. I'm going to go up to my Insert tab, top of my screen. In the Insert tab, I got a section called Illustrations. And in there I got Pictures. Pictures will allow you to grab something that's local on your machine or a network drive. Online Pictures will allow you to use Microsoft Bing to search for images online. Or if you've got a OneDrive account, you can hook up to your cloud service, OneDrive through Microsoft, and grab images that you might be storing there as well. Well, for this example, this demonstration, I'm going to use Bing, the search engine tool, to find some free clip art images. So I'll click on Online Pictures. It's going to open up give it a moment here, Insert Pictures window. And you can see I have two options, Bing or OneDrive. Now I'm not going to use my OneDrive. I'll go to Bing, and I'm going to say, I'll say Bills. I'm going to hit my Enter key on my keyboard, and it's going to search. It's searching online using Bing as its search engine tool. And I've got all these images that are being returned to me. With the Buffalo Bills. Let's see, I'll find a good one here. A lot of Buffalo Bill images there. Let's grab this one here. It looks like an Excel spreadsheet, right? With some bill information. So I'll click on that to select it. I'm now going to hit the Insert button, and this will drop that image into my Excel document. There it is. It's great, right? It adds a little bit to it. We don't want to get really wacky with it and put a whole bunch of images in here, but just that right there. It's a visual. People can relate to it. They can tie that visual image back into the spreadsheet with all these numbers again. Now for me, it's a little bit too big, so I'm going to grab one of the corners there, just shrink it up. Let's make that a little bit smaller. And you know what? I'm going to make it really small and just put it up there next to my title. And you know what? Just for fun, I'm going to copy it, Control-C, Control-V to paste, and I'll put two of them in there. Let's put one over here as well. Kind of balance out the layout of this spreadsheet here. But inserting images. This one came from Bing search engine tool. Just insert online pictures, search for something, drop it into your Excel document. You can do a little bit of formatting with it, not a lot, but you can shrink them up, you can change the size and so on. So try this out. Insert an image. Whether you're doing online images, remember this is coming from the Insert tab, online pictures where you can use Bing, or grab something that's local on your system and go browse your computer. Whatever you do. But insert an image into your Excel document. Spice it up. Give it something more visual that the users can look at. So we're talking about inserting additional elements into an Excel document. We just saw images. See those two little images there at the top? Very nice. More visual. Now I want to take a look at what's called Excel shapes. Through Excel shapes, we have all sorts of shapes that we can add to an Excel document. We got simple shapes like squares and rectangles and circles and pyramids, triangles, all sorts of shapes. We got arrows and banners and call-out bubbles and explosions, kind of star-looking shapes. But we got all these basic shapes that we can use to add additional content to our documents, something more visual. Now, once again, something we don't want to get too overboard on and too much clutter going on our page, but use it to enhance the document, not to distract. Unless that's your purpose. Maybe we did really crummy in sales and I'm throwing all this garbage out there just to distract people. So we could use it to do that, but still the same, keep it simple. What I'll use shapes for is to draw attention to specific areas of my document. maybe circle areas or draw arrows to point at specific elements within my spreadsheet. Take a look. This is how you work with Excel shapes. This is another insert command. So on my insert tab, back into illustrations, I got what looks like a couple of basic shapes, square, circle, and a diamond. If I give that a click, it's going to open up my shapes menu, and you can see I got all sorts of stuff in there. Well, for me, you know what? I'm going to grab this one, this rounded corner rectangle. I'll give that a click. I'm going to come out and just click and drag someplace to create a rectangle. Just left click and drag. There's my triangle. Great. I got some default formatting. It's got a light blue fill, a dark blue border around it. That's great, but what am I going to use this for? It's just a rectangle. Well, what I want to do here is I want to highlight. I want to draw a little rectangle. I'm just going to move it over here. That highlights all my totals. So I've got that, but this rectangle's got a darker color so I can't see through to my numbers. I just want to draw a rectangle around it to draw attention to those totals. So with that highlighted, I could do some additional formatting here. Up on my ribbon, top of my screen, with my shape selected, I've now got a Format tab where I got all this various formatting that I can get into. Changing the color, changing the border, and so on. We'll take a look at those features here in just a moment because I want to see behind that box. Let's try another shape before we do this though. Let's see, where do we find shapes at? I want to draw a little arrow that points to the 66%. That's just ridiculous, right? That's just too much of my income going to rent. So I want to draw a nice big fat arrow pointing to that. Draw attention to that 66%. So once again, back to insert, back to shapes, and I'm going to grab one of these block arrows. I'm going to grab this one, this left arrow. So with that selected, I'll come out here and left click and drag, and I've now created this nice little arrow pointing to that 60%. Right, you open up this document, what are you going to look at? There's an arrow pointing, right? There's a box in there drawing attention for our users. So try this out. We're going to do some formatting here in a moment, but draw a few shapes. Just insert shapes, whatever you want to do there. Draw some shapes to draw attention to the content. All right, so I've got a couple of Excel shapes out there on my document. Simple shapes, nothing big. I've got a rectangle, rounded corner rectangle, and I've got an arrow. Like I said, nothing big. But now let's take a look at some of the formatting. I want these shapes to really stand out and draw the users in. So first, I'll take a look at the rectangle. I'm going to select my rectangle, and once I've selected this Excel shape, I now get a new tab at the top of my screen, the Drawing Tools Format tab. And if I click on that Format tab, I've got all my formatting options right here. So like I said earlier, I've got the rectangle, but it's got a solid fill color, which is really blocking out what I'm trying to draw attention to. Well, with that shape selected, I'm going to go into the Format tab, I'll find my shape styles, and I'm going to change the shape fill, the color of the fill. And I'm going to say no fill. I don't want any fill around it. So now I've just got an outline, a border around this shape. And I'm going to format the border. I'll go to Shape Outline. And I want to make it red. I want to change the weight or the thickness. Let's go to like 3 points. And I think that's looking pretty good. Now I've created this outline to really draw attention to that group of numbers. And you know what? I think I'm going to shrink it up just a little bit so I can read that title. Let's pull that in. Let's make this look just a little bit more professional inside, or a little bit cleaner in design. There we go. All right, looking pretty solid. Now I want to do the same thing with my arrow. I want to make it more presentable, get it to stick out more. So once again, with the arrow selected, back to my Format tab, I'm going to change the fill. I'm going to make it, let's do this red color right here. I'm going to change the outline. I'll make it the darker red. And maybe I'll change the thickness of it as well. Let's go up maybe 2 1/4 in the size. Now I've got this nice thick red arrow that's really drawing attention to this 66% here. So if this is your first time opening this document, where are your eyes going to go? Right to that arrow, right to the red marks. There's not a whole lot of color in there, right? The red only shows up a little bit, so it's going to really draw the attention. And I'm outlining areas, I'm pointing at something. It's a really strong indicator of, hey, look right here, right? All by utilizing these simple little shapes. Now I want to show off one more shape here before I close this discussion. So where do we find shapes again? You remember that? Back up to the Insert tab, into Illustrations, Shapes. Now, some of these shapes come with additional options, such as the smiley face, or maybe even the arrow. I'll show the arrow as well. But I'm going to grab the smiley face. I'm going to go someplace and left click and drag just to create the smiley face. There we go. Some of these shapes come with additional little yellow markers on them, and this allows you to manipulate some of the properties of the shape. For example, with the smiley face, I can grab that little yellow marker and make it frown. Or I can make it indifferent. Doesn't matter anyway. Let's just okay, whatever. So we can manipulate that shape. I can format this one as well. With the arrow, I get a couple of the little yellow markers there. I can increase the head of this arrow just by moving that around. I can change the thickness of the tail on this arrow. So you can really start to manipulate this beyond just colors. Not all the shapes have this. I think my rectangle does because it's a rounded corner rectangle, and I can change how round those corners are. So really starting to manipulate and get these shapes to look exactly the way you want them to, not just default out of the box, plain, boring, simple shapes, but add a little bit of style to. Do some formatting with them. So try this out. You've added some shapes, now do some formatting with them. Change the border, change the fill, grab a couple other shapes, play around with those little yellow markers on there to change the dynamics of the shapes, but use them to enhance. Try not to distract. Maybe the smiley face, although it's pretty neat, maybe it's just not needed. I'm going to delete it. Just select it, hit my delete key, gone. So try adding some shapes and mess around with the formatting found on the formatting tab that you get with the shape that's selected. When Microsoft Office 2007 was released, Microsoft introduced a new feature inside of Excel, Word, and PowerPoint. This is a feature that prior to 2007, none of the Office applications had. And this deals with creating more complex diagrams through basic shapes. This is called Smartart. Take a look. Through Smartart, we can create very fancy diagrams through a couple simple clicks of our mouse. Watch this. I'm going to go up to my Insert tab, top of my screen. On the Insert tab, we saw illustrations earlier. We had pictures, online pictures, we had Excel shapes. That's where you got some of your basic shapes. Now, in the past, if I wanted to create something like an org chart or maybe a process flow diagram, I'd have to use basic shapes and really start to diagram this myself. Create all the rectangles in the organization chart, create the connector lines. It was a huge hassle. Well, no longer. Now, right below the Excel shapes, I have Smartart. And Smartart are some canned, out-of-the-box, fancy diagrams. Take a look. I'll give that button a click. This opens up my Choose Smartart graphic window. And I've got all these different categories of Smartart that I can pick from. Fancy little diagrams. Let's see, I'm going to go to Process. And now I've got all these process diagrams I can pick from. I'm going to grab this kind of donut circle one here. It's called a circle accent timeline. So I've got some type of process that I want to demonstrate to my users over some timeline. Well, through this Smartart graphic, I'll select it, I'll hit OK. I can now diagram this process, this timeline process, through these nice graphical shapes. They've given me this nice little table here on the left where I can start to manipulate the shapes and the content within those shapes. So let's say something like, oh, you know what? I'm going through a document approval process. This is over some period of time. So my first step in getting a document approved is I got to create the document. So let's say create document. Let's spell that the right way. Let's just say DOC. Creating the document. Let's call it create document. All right. Now let's see the second step. Once it's been created, I then need to send it for approval. And let's say, oops, let's spell that right. Send for approval. All right, let's make sure I get my spaces in there. Now I've got two major steps in here, creating the document and sending for approval. Perhaps there's some sub-steps within each of those. Let's say for creating the document, you got to do a brainstorm. Maybe you're going to hold a meeting with your coworkers and you're going to brainstorm the purpose or the design of this document. Then you're going to do the initial draft of the document. All right, initial. Is that right? I feel like I'm missing an I in there. I think I'm missing an I. You get the point. So I'm going to create the document. That creation phase has two sub phases in there. And now for sending approval, I've got two steps. I've got to send the emails. Okay, and I've got to collect the responses. All right. Now, this particular diagram gave me two major steps. But you know what? I think I need a third one in this creation and approval of the document. So what I'm going to do is after collect responses, responses, I'll hit my enter key. This creates a third additional sub-step, but I don't want a sub-step. I want a next major step. So what I'm going to do here is up above, I've got some additional tools. With the Smartart selected, I get two new tabs, Design and Format. On the Design tab, underneath Create Graphic, I've got the one sub-bullet selected, but I'm going to promote it. I'm going to move it up in the hierarchy. And now I've got a next major step. And we'll call this one Final Approval. All right, and that sounds good. I've got this really fancy diagram that I could have created through the simple shapes that we were talking about earlier, but this is streamlined. It's out of the box, fancy little diagrams that we can take advantage of. Just filling in the table, the little bullet list to create your Smartart graphic. Now, if you want to do some formatting with this, you got all sorts of formatting options. I'm going to select the border, not a specific shape, but just the border. I'll go up to my Design tab, and here I got Smartart Styles. And you got all sorts of styles to pick from. I'll just hover my mouse over the top of these. They're pretty slick. That was kind of neat. I think I'm going to run with this one here. This one's kind of neat. Adds some type of dimension to it. Gives it a little more 3D effect. That's a pretty slick one. If you want to get into the nitty-gritty of formatting your shapes, your Smartart all by yourself, you don't have to use styles. All those are quick and dirty and just right away you can format your shape. But you can also go to the Format tab and you can do all your formatting to your heart's content. Select the shape, change the color. Maybe I want my main shapes here to actually be a different color. So I'll make these ones, we'll make them orange. I like that blue and orange. That looks good together actually. Let's grab that. So you don't have to stick with the styles, you can really do it on your own as well through the Format tab. But you got Smartart, really quick diagrams, fancy diagrams. Not just this one, but you got a whole slew of them to pick from. Org charts, process flow charts, hierarchy charts, all sorts of stuff for you to work with. Try it out. I've just created a blank workbook here, went to inserted Smartart, grabbed one that caught my eye, and now I'm just filling in the basics that make up this diagram. And try formatting it as well. Use a style, or maybe hop over to the Format tab and format it on your own.